Spam is not a recent phenomenon, having existed on the internet before the days of Usenet, nor are mysteries, which can be demonstrated by John Titor or Ong's hat. Today, if you were to spam cryptic text with seemingly no motive or prior warning, it doesn't seem to be implausible at all for it to be interpreted as some sort of alternate reality game at first. This type of mystery may seem oversaturated today, but years ago, such activity would be guaranteed to turn some heads in the world of Usenet. On 5 August 1996, a variety of Usenet newsgroups were flooded with what seemed like randomly generated strings of text consisting of randomly chosen words with seemingly no order or clue that could allude to their meaning or message. These messages sometimes contained thousands of words, which points to the idea that they were randomly generated. They were difficult to mitigate, as the randomly chosen words and phrases made it near impossible or extremely difficult to use kill files to filter them out. Catherine Hampton, an administrator for alt.religion.christian.boston Church, a news group that was in the path of the landslide of spam, claimed that she was personally attacked by the spam and wished to track down the perpetrators. All of the posts had different information attached to them in their headers. The from lines and post locations were all different. The headers also appeared to be forged and had various mismatched data contained in them. All of the data seemed to have been chosen at random from a list. This is difficult to see, as the vast majority of posts have had their header information stripped away from when they were moved to archivers or they were lost completely. But what does Markovian Parallax Denigrate mean? Markovian can refer to something relating to the Markov property, or more concisely, anything relating to the Russian mathematician Andrei Markov, for which the property is named for. Less likely, it could refer to the Markovians, an alien species in the Whale World science fiction novel series written by Jack L. Chalker. Parallax is defined as the apparent displacement of an observed object due to a change in the position of the observer, and denigrate is defined as to speak damagingly of, or criticize in a derogatory manner. The meaning of Markovian Parallax Denigrate appears to be mostly irrelevant, and the term was derived from the fact that these three words appeared much more commonly in the spam than any other words. One theory to explain this is that it was used by the perpetrator of the spam in order to keep track of their activities. So who was behind this and what was their intention? Hampton believed that it was performed by someone who intended to troll Christian-based news groups, or that it was some sort of red herring. In one of the most well-known archived messages, one that began with "Jitterbugging McKinley, Abe Break Newtonian," there was an email attached to it that had the name Susan Lindauer in it. The name belongs to a former journalist who was charged for being an agent of the Iraqi government around 2004. Additionally, she is also known for promoting various conspiracy theories. To people investigating the mystery years later, it didn't seem odd to make a connection between these two occurrences. In an article by Anchorage Daily News published after she was charged, it is reported that she was a smart girl with deeply held beliefs who was drawn to drama. She is described as the type of person people could potentially pin the blame for Markovian Parallax Denigrate on. Like many mysteries similar in nature to it, it was believed it had some sort of secret message behind it, and even compared to number stations. Some believed it was an attempt at a smear campaign by Lindauer's detractors in retaliation for her attempts to reveal the identity of the perpetrator of the 1988 Lockerbie bombings. However, in 2012, Lindauer in an email stated, "I've heard of this cyber phenomenon, but I am not the Susan Lindauer who authored the code. Wish I could enlighten you. I'm baffled too." The email that led people to believe that Lindauer was the perpetrator behind Markovian Parallax Denigrate was Susan_Lindauer at worf.uwsp.edu. UWSP is an acronym for University of Wisconsin at Stevens Point. The Lindauer that the email presumably belonged to graduated in 1994, 2 years prior to the posting of the messages. This individual was tracked down, contacted, and denied being behind the messages. The seemingly randomized information attached to the messages pointed to the likely explanation that this Lindauer simply had their email address scraped to be added to the messages. Another name who some believed may have belonged to the perpetrator of the spam is Bob Alisot. The previous year, he had spammed another news group with over 15,000 poems within the span of only a few hours. But other than the fact that he was a fellow Usenet spammer, there is no other evidence pointing to him being the one behind the spam. He appeared to be a somewhat well-known name on Usenet at the time, apparently attempting to save Usenet from censorship by destroying it. The messages were likely produced by a text generator, which Markov chains are commonly used for. Markov processes can be utilized by spammers to produce text resembling things typed out by a real person. There have not been any successful attempts at decoding any message that may have been hidden within the text, and if it was produced using a Markov chain, it is very basic, and similar results can be easily replicated. If a Markov process was used to produce these messages, it would not be its debut on Usenet. In 1984, a bot on Usenet named Markovian was created by Rob Pike and Bruce Ellis, and posted messages produced via Markov chains. They were complex enough to convince some that he was a real person. Some of the other names attached to the messages include Eric Inhale and Glyceride. The most likely theory is that the messages were produced by someone who intended to troll the targeted news groups, likely someone who is subscribed to these groups as they all share the topic of Christianity and religion in common. If they do hold some sort of secret message, it is likely that they were directed to one individual or a select group, who were the only ones capable of decoding it. This wouldn't explain why it would be done publicly and scattered across news groups. Markovian Parallax Denigrate may have been an attempt to smear a journalist, an attempt to communicate secret messages between a presumably small group, or simply a troll who wanted to agitate a group of fellow Usenet users. Regardless of its purpose, it became another example of how mysteries are far from a recent phenomenon on the internet.